True horror stories for sleep, the Miller family nightmares. This happened when I was 31. My name's Amanda. I was a single mom raising my two little girls, Ellie 8 and Chloe 6, and I tucked them into bed one ordinary Friday night thinking the scariest thing I'd do that weekend was run out of coffee. 2 hours later, something walked into my yard, spoke through my front door, and left a sentence I still hear when I close my eyes. You left the window open. If you ever think someone would warn you before they hurt you, they don't. They whisper a lie that proves they've already been inside. It was early fall, the kind of night that smells like wet leaves and old air. I'd left a window cracked in the living room because the movie had left the house warm and the night was cool. I put the girls to bed. They wanted to sleep with the window fan on. They said it made them feel safe. I said okay. Popcorn still dusted the coffee table like a small, harmless crime. Blankets curled around tiny knees. I kissed them both, turned down the TV, and went back and sat on the couch with my phone. For half an hour, nothing happened. The house hummed in the ordinary ways old houses do, the refrigerator's distant clunk, the pipes settling, the kind of background noise you ignore because it means the world is working the way it's supposed to. Then, very deliberately, the world stopped being ordinary. A step on gravel, slow, counted, not the shuffle of a dog or the clack of a jogger's sneaker, something heavier. My phone screen lit the room. I hit mute, and whatever sound was in the backyard became the loudest thing on earth. A scrape along the siding, fingernails, I thought. Then a light, mocking tap on the kitchen window. It wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. My throat closed. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself to breathe. I told myself 1,000 small lies that would keep me from sounding like the terrified woman that was already blooming inside of me. I should have checked on the girls first. I should have gone to the window and looked, but every hair on my body said wait. The back door rattled like someone would rattle a jar, a metal click. The single deadbolt that's supposed to be security felt suddenly like tissue. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. My voice on the line was a whisper that felt obscene to make, but the dispatcher heard me. Stay hidden. Officers are on the way. Keep quiet. The words were clinical, practice. They meant to soothe. They meant to buy time. Time is a currency you only realize you don't have when a man is outside testing the locks. I inched toward the girls' room. They slept like small, trusting statues. Ellie shifted, turning her face to the wall. Chloe murmured a dream. I pulled the door nearly closed and curled on the floor with them. Phone pressed to my ear, the dispatcher's voice so small in my ear that I felt I could crush it with one cough. Then the porch, the front doorknob, the slow turning, like a man enjoying the knowledge that something valuable is behind it. "Hello," he said low, close to the wood. "You left your window open." It was not a question. It wasn't a threat either. It landed somewhere colder. Assurance. He knew. He'd already been inside. I felt my knees give. My breath skittered. I pressed my hand to Chloe's mouth when she whimpered and told her to breathe through me. Ellie's small body trembled against my side. We were made tiny by the house that had always been our fortress. The back door popped open. I heard the slack of a shoe hitting the floor, the sound of someone moving without haste, without fear. Footsteps in the hallway, measured, patient, like someone learning the map of a place they planned to return to. "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "They're 3 minutes out." 3 minutes. A lifetime. Outside the bedroom, the doorknob moved. A whisper through wood. "I know you're in there." The hinge groaned. Then the first shoulder slam. The door shuddered under a weight that did not care about the people on the other side. The frame complained and splintered. I could do nothing but cradle my girls and count the seconds between bangs. I whispered rote things. A song. The concession to stay still. My voice sounded foreign to me, flat and small. The second bang made the house answer with a long, violent crack. Then as the door threatened to fold like paper, lights flared through the blinds. Sirens shredded the night. The man bolted. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He ran. The back door slammed. Officers were in the yard. 3 long, furious breaths later, bullets of blue and red stroking the walls. They sent a flood of boots through the house, commands cutting through the room like a hand. He was gone. Gone so cleanly it felt theatrical. No face to catch, no flash of a person. The officers moved through the rooms like they were taking inventory of a crime scene while I still felt like I was stitched to the floor. They questioned me, their voices folding into the static of my thoughts. They searched the yard, canvassed neighbors, dusted for prints. They found nothing. No prints on the door, no footprints beyond the rough gravel where the steps had been, like he had been a ghost of motion, real in the seconds he'd spent, then gone. But he'd left something. On my kitchen counter, a small scrap of paper curled into the lip of the trash as if tossed and then redirected by a wind that wasn't there. The handwriting was cramped. One line on it in a quick, impatient script. Ellie, 8. Chloe, 6. Amanda, 31. You left the window open. I read it 3 times before the letters stopped meaning English and became a language of thin, purposeful evil. The officer who found it held it in latex gloves and looked at me with an expression that meant he'd seen the steady shock of survivors before. He told me they'd run every search they could. Weeks passed like someone else's movie. Posters appeared on a storefront. Detectives called for DNA. I watched trucks of forensic people comb the yard like they were looking for a missing object that the intruder had taken. Neighbors said they'd seen someone around. A van without plates. A shadow under a street light. But nothing concrete. No arrest. No face. And the scrap of paper, call it a totem, call it a message, was the worst because it proved intent. He had a list. He had written our names. He'd known our ages. He'd planned. I lay awake for nights counting breath sounds. Every creak became footfall. Every late car became a prelude. Ellie learned to sleep with her back to the wall, hands clamped around a teddy bear. Chloe wet the bed the second week. She wouldn't say why she'd woken. Ellie started leaving the nightlight on in the hallway, the thin beam like a bandage against the dark. We moved neighborhoods not long after, not because we believed the police were failing, though they were never able to find him, but because I believed that space could hold a memory, and I didn't want my daughters' lives tattooed with the idea that the world could fold in on them. Moving did not fix the sound that haunted me. The whisper lived in the bones of the night. You left the window open. I replayed it until I could say it with the exact cadence. I think in some private corner of my brain I was trying to understand whether it had been a boast or a fact. Which is worse, knowing you were violated or knowing you were known? Months later I started to notice small things around the new house. A twig snapped where no twig should have, a neighbor's porch light off at the wrong time. Once a trail of small, dark footprints on my back porch after a storm, soaked into the wood like the impression of a creature that had been there. Police came. They checked addresses. They took photos. They told me it could be a coincidence. They told me the human mind looks for patterns in the dark. I wanted to believe them as hard as I wanted to collapse. One autumn night, about 6 months after the strange occurrences, I found an envelope tucked under our welcome mat. No stamp, no return. On the outside, in the same cramped script, 3 names: Ellie, Chloe, Amanda. Inside, a single line written on a clean square of paper: "You moved." He didn't yell it, he didn't threaten, he stated a fact, a sentence that meant calmly, "I know where you are." I called the detectives. They told me to change the locks again, to consider home security installed by professionals, to vary my routes. But the practical advice was only the scaffolding around the thing I really feared, that there was someone who had made my family the subject of a list. The nights after that were worse. The girls began to wake convinced that footsteps were in the attic. They began to ask if someone could see them while they slept. I stopped sleeping. When I did, I dreamed of eyes behind my curtains, patient and exact. I learned small rituals, double locks, curtains drawn, a camera pointed at the driveway. I made up stories about the man, about why he'd chosen us, what satisfied him about whispering through wood. I imagined he was a local predator, hungry for the small details of other people's lives. I pictured his apartment full of clippings and names, a shrine built of ordinary things. It made me sick, and also, in a terrible private way, it made the terror manageable because it made him human. We never stopped being on the list. We were on a scrap of paper. We were on an envelope. In my head, we became a breadcrumb trail he left to prove he could find us. The police said sometimes that's the way stalkers escalate. Small messages, tests to see how you react, to teach you that you are not safe. One night, Ellie asked me, voice thick and small, "Mommy, do you think he'll ever come back?" She sounded like a child asking about Santa. She sounded like a human asking about death. I hugged her so hard her breath hitched. I told her I would keep us safe. I lied. We learned to live in the shadow of that lie. We learned lights and locks and whispered codes. We learned that the world could tilt and still hold you up if you were careful enough. But the truth is, we never really felt safe again. Not fully. Not when the wind pressed on the window that once sat open. Not when a car idled too long at the corner. Not when a man's voice could be the softest sound and the most certain proof that he'd been where he shouldn't be. If you are lying awake with your windows cracked tonight, listen. It might be the crickets or the neighbor's TV or nothing, but don't assume ordinary sounds are harmless. And if someone ever tells you in a warm, casual tone that you left something open, believe them. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what an intruder takes. It's what he proves, that he has the map to your life, that he can write your name on a scrap of paper and leave it for you to find. We never caught him. We never saw his face. We only have the list. And sometimes when the house is very quiet, I can still hear the rasp of paper, small, neat, deliberate, the footsteps on the gravel, and the words you left the window open. The memory tightens like a knot in my chest. If that scrap of paper taught me anything, it's this: the world is full of quiet people who notice things, and not all of them are kind. What would you have done if this happened to you? Don't keep it to yourself. Please comment below. And if real horror is your thing, subscribe to Sites of Horror and turn on notifications so you never miss a story.